He touched down, bowed his head, and then stepped into a city at war. The sequence told you almost everything you needed to know about the week's priorities, and the interview he gave in Kyiv filled in the rest. Prince Harry's words were spare and careful. He is happy where he is. He does not regret the book that rattled the family's china. Over the past 4 years he has discovered things that really, really hurt, and most pointedly, you cannot have reconciliation before you have truth. In Windsor terms, that is not an outburst. It is a marker on the table. Older viewers will have felt the echo. The late Queen handled rough weather with a tight rein and a long memory. You did not hear her feelings, you saw her diary. Harry's register is different, but not chaotic. He tends to put one sentence into the room and let it work. It invites you to consider what truth means in a family whose survival has always depended on discretion. It also reminds you that his battles these past years have been fought not only in bookshops and television studios, but in courtrooms, where the word discovery has a technical bite. He is telling the world, calmly, that some of what he learned there cut as deeply as any headline. Set that against the picture in London. A father and a son in a quiet room, no photo, no briefing, 50-odd minutes of cool tea and careful words after 19 months of not quite managing to get to the same side of a door. For a monarchy that does its best work in untelevised rooms, that was the right shape. Harry kept the contents of the meeting out of the news and gave a single polite line, his great thank you, that neither invited nor rewarded pursuit. The palace got what it needed, respect for privacy, a demonstration that personal channels still exist, and no new kindling for a press corps that will burn anything dry. The tension lives, as it so often does now, at Kensington. William's life is designed around guardrails, constitutional optics, security advice, the dull heroism of turning up on time where you said you would. He is not just a brother, he is a future sovereign with a public that expects steadiness before sentiment. For him, the phrase, truth before reconciliation, can sound like a summons to arbitration, who said what, when, with which witness, and to what end. He will not submit the institution to that kind of process, even privately, because he believes the crown's value depends on its refusal to be dragged into the granularity of grievance. His answer is to keep walking the rooms that keep the country calm, school halls, clinical waiting areas, early years centers, and to let the quiet discipline of repetition say what the palace will not. Harry's answer is different, but legible. He puts his shoulder to the work that carries his name when the titles don't, Invictus, Veterans Recovery, the hard, unglamorous graft of rehabilitation, and then he speaks just enough to keep the wider argument from going stale. No new accusations, no fresh scenes described, but an insistence that there is a ledger and it is not balanced yet. That middle lane will frustrate absolutists on both sides, but it is a lane built for the long game, pressure without rupture, purpose without retreat. If you are of an age to have mediated peace around your own kitchen table, you will recognize the triangulation. A parent, not as strong as last year, wants to ease the temperature between children who cannot occupy the same memory without lighting old fuses. One child comes because it is the right thing and because time, which used to feel infinite, no longer does. The other keeps a respectful distance because proximity, in this season, would be mistaken for surrender. The parent invites, the brothers hold their ground, and everyone returns to work in the morning, which is how grown families survive stretches like this. There is a second rhythm running beneath the headlines, and it belongs to the institution. The palace has learned to answer the age of commentary with the age-old cure, schedule, not statement. A good day for the crown is a day that looks boring on paper, and leaves a room steadier than it found it. The public understands this better than pundits think. A carriage that arrives on time. A short speech that lands plainly. A garden party that feels like the nation has been let onto its own back lawn. These are not diversions. They are the point in a constitutional system that relies on symbols to soothe a noisy century. That is why the Kyiv image matters in a separate register. Whatever you think of the brothers' quarrel, a prince visiting wounded soldiers under a banner he founded is a clean picture. It says, the work goes on, and it goes on where it should. For veterans and their families, the value is concrete: attention, donors, speed. For the rest of us, it's a reminder that some parts of public life justify themselves without footnotes. The palace may quietly wish the backdrop had been a London ward rather than a war capital, if only to avoid lazy comparisons, but the work remains good wherever it is done. Could the family meet in the middle? Possibly, but the middle is a moving target. For Harry, truth means private acknowledgement that specific choices did specific harm, and, where appropriate, that the record will be set straight when it can be. For William, truth means keeping faith with an institution that cannot afford to take every contested memory out into the light. For the king, truth may simply mean getting his sons into the same room, without drawing blood, and keeping it that way long enough for grandchildren to benefit. 3 truths can be true at once and still refuse to interlock. You can see why the timing of Harry's words mattered. He said his focus this year is his father's health, and that he hopes to see him more often. That line opened a door for compassion, without demanding anyone walk through it on camera. Illness has a way of clarifying what matters, and of excusing what cannot be mended yet. A son at his father's side is not a constitutional statement, it is a human one. A brother who keeps away is not an enemy, he is someone who knows his own limits and respects the line between family and function. A nation that has watched this family for 2 generations understands those distinctions more generously than the headlines do. Spare still hovers, of course. Harry's "My conscience is clear" closes off any hope that he might disavow the book in exchange for better seating. It also suggests that he sees the worst of the storm as weathered. He corrected the record as he saw it: the pages exist, they will outlive the current heat. Older readers may wish it had been otherwise, and still accept that the shelf cannot be unbuilt. The question now is not whether those chapters can be unwritten, it is whether fresh chapters can be written that do not require more public annotation than the institution can bear. There is an art to speaking softly in a loud time, and Catherine practices it better than most. Watch how often the temperature drops a degree when she enters the frame. Clothes that read as continuity, expressions that read as ease rather than theater, a way of listening that dignifies the person in front of her without making a headline of it. In weeks when the narrative tilts toward heat, that sort of presence becomes ballast. It reminds the country that most of the crown's value is still delivered at human height, where a well-timed smile and a hand on the forearm do more than any statement drafted by 6 people and cleared by 9. If you are looking for danger, it sits where it always sits for families like this, in the gap between image and outcome. The image that travels fastest will be Harry in Kyiv, and the suggestion that he knows dark family secrets. The outcome that will matter is slower: clinics funded, programs scaled, children steadied, rooms settled. William's team will keep stacking those outcomes like bricks. Harry's team will keep using images to pull attention into places where outcomes become possible. The lines may cross less than anyone would like, but the net effect can still be useful to the country that pays attention to both. There is also the matter of age. The king is in his late 70s, doing a job that demands more energy than it admits on paper. He will ration his days. He will rely more heavily on a small circle that understands both his temperament and the Constitution's limits. He will avoid turning private complexity into public theatre, not because he lacks feeling, but because he knows how brittle public trust becomes when it suspects the crown has been drafted into a family argument. The truest sign of his priorities may be the most boring: red boxes cleared, again and again, while letting others absorb the oxygen of speculation. So where are we, after the week's images and sentences have cooled? A father and younger son have re-established a private channel. A brother has kept to his lane with unswerving discipline. A wife has steadied the frame. A family has chosen, for now, proximity without performance. And a single line, "You cannot have reconciliation before you have truth," will hover over every future encounter like a weather report. The palace will, as ever, answer with its own, "You cannot have the crown if every truth is performed." Between those positions lies the only path that has ever worked for this institution: small mercies, repeated, fewer adjectives, more appointments, a little more kindness in private, a little less theatre in public. If that sounds unsatisfying to an era that wants closure by the weekend, remember that the monarchy does not deal in weekends. It deals in decades. And decades are won not by winning arguments, but by wearing grooves. The groove the family seems to be cutting now is narrow, low, and stubborn. Be seen where it helps, be quiet where it heals, and let time take the heat out of what statements cannot. If the past few days left you feeling pulled both ways, hopeful at the sight of two men in a room, wary at the sound of that word, truth, you are not alone. That is the shape of grown-up reconciliation, not a fanfare, not a press release, but a series of small decisions to keep showing up without demanding victory. For a public that remembers the late Queen's steadiness, and has watched her heirs try to honor it in a noisier world, that may be enough for now. The pictures will keep coming. The sentences will keep dropping. The work, if they are wise, will keep leading.